Hello everybody, my name is Mike Geig, and welcome to another one of our Unity Live sessions. This week we will be doing our third installment of the scripting primer. Now, if you're confused, originally this session was slated for last week, and then I forgot to promote it, and so now we're doing it this week. So yeah. So if you came here expecting the putting it together cinematic scene composition and whatnot, that will be next week, and instead doing the scripting primer today. Before we get started, just a couple rules about the scripting primer, kind of how it goes down. The scripting primer is really a chance for people who don't know how to code to get up to speed with some of the coding concepts of C#, really all programming languages in Unity. So I would prefer if we could keep the chat specifically to this session so that people can ask the questions that that they want to ask, and so that I can answer those questions. So I don't really want to talk about any other parts of Unity. I know a lot of people are talking about Flappy Birds and stuff like that. I don't really want to talk about that. I really just want to keep the chat specific to coding and specifically the topic that we're talking about at the time. That I find that makes the scripting primers or any primers really go a lot simpler. In case you're unaware, the scripting primers are very basic. We move very slowly. So if you're not interested in moving slowly, or you're not interested in the basics, then this is probably not the session for you. This is for the people who really want to talk about very basic coding structures and stuff like that for the next hour. Before I actually get into things, I'm going to go ahead and do what I always do and plug our Twitter accounts. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please follow us and talk to us on Twitter at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at The Ant Ranch. And just, let us know what's up. Let us know what we can do for you. I also will take this chance to mention that there's a big delay between you seeing this presentation and chat. So it's about a 20-second delay. So yeah, so if you ask a question, fear not. I'm going to try to see it. I'm going to try to get to it, but there's a bit of a delay, so you might not see it right away. Okay. So before we begin, like I said, I'm going to go slow because I'm going to be reading chat and stuff like that. So real quick here, I'm just going to read through chat and make sure I haven't missed anything important. And okay, cool. It looks like pretty much everyone is caught up on chat as well. So great. So in previous sessions, we talked about kind of what scripts are. We talked about very basic syntax. We talked about variables, the types of variables, which are often referred to as data types. We talked about scope, public versus private. And then the last session, we talked about operators, right? Arithmetic operators, assignment operators, equality, and logical. And then we kind of touched a little bit on if statements at the very end there, but we're going to ignore that. We're going to come back and we're going to start all fresh on if statements, conditionals, things like that. So as a real quick refresher, to create a script in Unity, you just right-click pretty much anywhere in the project, and we're going to go create. And Unity supports JavaScript, C#, and Boo. Now, I don't know too many people that use Boo. JavaScript is very popular. I do everything in C#, not because I believe C# is better than JavaScript in any way. It's the language that I know, and in my mind, the concepts of C# lend themselves more easily to the way Unity does stuff. Now, if you're a JavaScript programmer and you disagree, that's fine, doesn't really matter, but we're doing C#. And so I'm just going to call this maybe lesson script. It doesn't really matter. I just want to see the script. Also, to get the script to run, it has to be attached to something in a scene. So I'm just going to click and drag this over to my main camera and let go. And if I look at my main camera, I now see lesson script. All right. So whenever this scene runs, this script will also run. So let's go ahead and open it up and start talking about that. As some people in the chat are saying, the Unity script version of JavaScript is not real JavaScript. So that's correct, right? So if you're used to a lot of the stuff that JavaScript provides for you, Unity script doesn't have a lot of that stuff. So it's just the syntax. It's not a lot of the behaviors and stuff like that. But the same can be said for C# as well. A lot of the C#, like the .NET stuff, isn't there because it's using a library called Mono. Let's see. Just while this is opening, I'm reading through chat. will I ever do an advanced session? I do advanced, well, intermediate to advanced stuff quite often. It's very rarely that I do like the beginner, like scripting stuff and whatnot. Let's see here. Oh, and I guess I didn't mention this. All of the live sessions I do are always recorded and always made available. So yes, this will be posted later on today. So if you can't watch the whole thing, you can always come back and watch it later. Oh, that reminds me too. I did draw a picture for today. I figured we'll start off with that. It wasn't on the Facebook page, but here's your picture for today. I just figured I'd share it with you. I didn't post it on the Facebook promotion of the session because someone told me it looked like blood was raining from the sky, and that was not my intention. I just wanted there to be a coding picture. So anyway, I don't want to take up too much time with that, but I figured I'd share it with you because a lot of people seem to really like the pictures, so I figured I'd share that. All right. Fantastic. So I've zoomed in here now, and we can start talking about some code. All right. So basically, up until now, the code we've looked at has all been very linear, right? So I'll create a variable, I'll add something to the variable, I'll output the variable, I'll change the variable in some way, and whatever, and on and on and on. And there's really no decision to it, right? And so basically, all of the code we've written so far will always run with no exceptions, all right? So what we want to do this time is we want to talk about a concept called conditional logic. And conditional logic is based completely, or almost completely, on Boolean logic, true and false, all right? And what we want to do is we want to divert code based on some condition, which is why it's called a conditional, all right? And the most common conditional that we know of is the if statement, all right? That's something we use all the time. And the if statement basically asserts something is true. So if this one thing is true, I'm going to do something, some code, okay? And that is the basis of the conditional, right? And the conditional looks like this. The conditional in C# anyway, and JavaScript starts with if, the word if, and then some conditional in parentheses. And then two brackets, and whatever comes in these brackets will be executed if whatever's in these parentheses is true. All right, so I will say here in comments, conditional is true. So this lets us know that whatever we put in here is true. And an if statement can only make a single evaluation. It can only evaluate if something is true or something is false. And that is it. So I can't say like if for, right? That doesn't make any sense. If for what, right? That's not an evaluation. That's not a true or false. I can't say if true, right? That's a string. Again, that cannot be evaluated in any way, shape, or form. Now, I can say if true without the quotes, and that is the Boolean value true. I hate it when it does that. Boolean value true, and what that basically means is this condition statement will run all the time, every time. So that's not really all that useful, because why have an if statement if it's always going to run? So our conditional has to be some true or false, and it's always a good idea to make it some decision process, all right? 1 second here. There's a lot of activity in chat. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Please stop talking about Flappy Bird. I'm so sick of Flappy Bird, and I'm also not very good at it. Let's see. Okay, it looks like everyone's just talking about Flappy Bird, so, oh my god. All right, so let's talk about how we can use this to do something interesting, all right? And so what I want to say is, how about we have a situation where if your grade is a 90 or above, you get an A, and we're going to output an A to the screen, okay? I might say something along the lines of int grade equals, let's say, 95, okay? Which if you're using like the 100% grading system, like a 95%, 90 is generally, or A is generally 90 or above, or 94, but it depends on what grading system you're on. But anyway, I might say something along the lines of if grade is greater than or equal to, I hope you all remember greater than or equal to from our our equality, not our equality, our logical operator. No, not logical. Equality, yeah. I don't know what I'm thinking. Sorry about that. I was looking at my notes and I read the long line. So we might say something like, if grade is greater than or equal to 90, okay, then print, which is just going to write to the screen. We could also do debug.log, but I'm just going to do print. You've got an A. All right, so what we have here is we're saying if the grade is greater than or equal to 90, then we're going to print you've got an A. If you're not really familiar with the if-then way of talking, it's interesting to go look at Visual Basic, VB. I don't generally do a lot of VB programming. I don't particularly like the language, but it's really good for beginners because it's verbose, because it's going to say if grade is greater than or equal to 90, then do this, right? And so it's that whole if-then way of thinking that's basically replaced by brackets and C-based languages. All right, let's see. And we'll talk about more complex if statements. A lot of people in chatter right now are talking about inline if statements and all that stuff, right? The tertiary operator and whatnot. We'll get there, so don't worry about that. So let's go ahead. So I've saved this. I'm going to go back to Unity. Let's go ahead and run it. And I think we both know, or all know, what we're going to see in the console here. I run this, and I'm going to see you've got an A, right? Which is good. That's exactly what I wanted to see. You've got an A. And the reason it said that is because the start method fired off, because the object was initialized, created a variable called grade equals 95. If grade is greater than or equal to 90, print you've got an A. All right? Fantastic. Now, I don't want to talk about that just yet. So let's go ahead and look at it not passing. I'm just going to go ahead and do 85, right? So it's going to basically say int grade equals 85. If the grade is greater than or equal to 90, which is not true, the grade is 85. So this is a false. This will not print, okay? And we'll resume whatever's after this. So I'll go ahead and save this. We'll run it. We all know what's going to happen. We get nothing, but I just wanted to prove it by showing it to you. Okay. So if statements, conditionals, is basically a true or a false. It can't evaluate a maybe, it can't do anything like that. It will be either true or false, all right? Basically, you know, that's it. Now, we can make, I'm sorry, I'm reading chat here. Some people are talking about casting the floats. So, yeah, everyone's just kind of hopping ahead. So basically what we want to talk about is we want to talk about a more complex conditional. Computers can only make one decision at a time, ever, right? But with multiple cores and how fast they run, it seems like they're making a whole bunch of decisions at the same time. They're not really. It just seems that way. And so let's talk about a more complex statement. And so what we might want to do is we might want to say if your grade is greater than a 90, or I don't know, I'm going to make something up. Or let's say bool honor scale. There's no such thing as an honor scale. I'm just inventing this thing right now. So let's say on an honor scale, an 85 is an A. Or I'm sorry, let's just say if you're on the honor scale, you automatically get an A. That's not a real thing. I'm making that up. I wish I was on that in school. So I'm going to say if the grade is greater than or equal to 90, or, remember from our operators, our logical operators, the or, so if one thing or the other thing. So if our grade is greater than 90, or honor scale equals true. And, oops, no semicolon. This is a mistake a lot of people make if statements. They put a semicolon at the end. No semicolon. So this is saying if your grade is greater than 90, or your honor scale flag, you're on the honor scale, equals true. And notice the double equals, not the single equals. That is completely different. That's your assignment operator. Double equals. The two biggest mistakes beginners make when working with programming is they either have a single equals there or they have a semicolon. All right? Neither will give you an error. And both will just make your program kind of wacky and you won't know why. So neither of them is inherently wrong. I can assign the value true to honor scale and then evaluate that as true. Actually, it looks like MonoDevelop is smart enough to prevent me from doing that. I can also put a semicolon here, and that won't throw an error. It'll just print A every time. So those are the problems that we get. So let's go ahead and run this. And I'll run it, and I see you've got an A. Now, it's interesting that it says I've got an A because my grade is not greater than a 90, right? But my honor scale variable is true. Now, if I were to say and, so or requires only one of these to be true for the whole thing to be true. And requires both of them to be true. All right, this is our short circuit and. by the way. If you're curious about what that means, watch the last video, because it's not your regular and, it's your short circuit and. That's your regular and, this is your short circuit and. So if we say your grade, this is saying my grade has to be greater than or equal to 90 and my honor scale variable has to be true. Okay, so in this case, this would no longer ring true and we'll get no output. All right, because only one of those was true, not both of those. All right, and so some people have already caught on in chat about the double equal sign. Let me talk to you about this. This is not necessary, the way I wrote this. I just did it the long form so you guys can see effectively what I'm saying. But since what we need is we need to evaluate either true or false here, and this variable happens to be a Boolean that already equals true, I don't need this double equal sign true. I can actually just say and honor scale, which has a value of true or false. I don't need the double equal sign equals true there. Right? Like I said, I just wanted to illustrate what it was I was talking about. And if I want to say something along the lines of if honor scale equals false, right? I don't have to do that either. I just have to say if honor scale or if not honor scale. All right, so those are just two shorthanded ways. You definitely don't have to do that. If you're confused by how that works, there's no harm in doing this whatsoever. There's no harm in that whatsoever. It's just, you'll see later, a lot of people just shorthand stuff. Okay? So let's get even more, let's get even more complex. Okay? So let's talk about, let's use these variables in a more complex way. So let's say my grade has to be greater than 90, or my grade has to be greater than 80, and I have to be on the honor scale. All right, so consider that. That's actually 3 conditionals, but it's really 1 conditional versus 2 conditionals, right? Because let's think about this again. I want to say, hey, is your grade greater than 90, or is your grade greater than 80 and you're on the honor scale? So let's see how that would look. So I'm going to leave this, is my grade greater than or equal to 90, or, and in this case I'll put some parentheses, because same thing, mathematical order of operations, or am I on the honor scale and is my grade greater than or equal to 80? So you see what we have here. This is a much more complex if statement now, okay? And it helps a lot to say it out loud, right, to yourself, to work it out here. So I'm going to say, hey, is my grade greater than or equal to 90, or am I on the honor scale, which is the same as saying honor scale equals true, and my grade is greater than 80, okay, which is effectively what I've said here. So go ahead and think to yourself for a second, will this pass or will this fail? Will I see you've got an A, right? So, tally it up in your head there for a second, see if you can figure it out. And let's go ahead back to Unity and let's run it. And we see you've got an A, all right? So yes, this if statement did evaluate to true. And why did it evaluate to true? Well, my grade is not greater than 90. My grade is 85. However, with an or statement, only one side has to be true, right? So this side is false. Let's evaluate this side, which is a more complex statement with an and inside there. It says, is honor scale true? Yes. And is grade greater than 80? Yes. So this side evaluates to true, and the whole thing thus evaluates to true, and we print you've got an A. All right? So that's like I said, that's a more complex way of doing it, and we can get more and more complex. There's no reason that we can't do more and more and more. Now, for the sake of good programming practices, it's not a good idea to have like huge if statements with all this complex stuff in there. You really need to focus on your logic and make sure it's not too completely unwieldy. But if you're just beginning, like if you're new, go wild. Everyone's going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to do inefficient things, and it's only with practice and experience you get better at those. So, it's much better for you to make mistakes and learn than to be so crippled by your fear of making mistakes that you don't do anything and you don't learn, right? So, have fun with it. Go wild. One second here, I'm checking chat. Yes, I will cover inline if statements. Yeah, okay. thank you to everyone who's saying let me go in order. I certainly appreciate that because I will go in order. I don't like jumping around. It makes things confusing for everybody. So, okay. We get this part now, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. You can always watch this video again later. So let's come back to my original statement, all right? So what if I want to say that if my grade is greater than or equal to 90, I'm going to output, you've got an A. But if I don't have an A, I want to output the words, you did not get an A. Well, let's see what happens here. This is what beginners normally will do. They'll say, hey, if your grade is equal to 90, we'll print you've got an A. Otherwise, let's print you did not get an A. And okay, so my grade is 85. So if my grade is greater than 90, I'll see you got an A. If my grade is not, you'll see that I did not get an A. So let me run this, and I will see you did not get an A. Great. This works, right? So beginners, everybody that's sitting there at home thinking, fantastic, we got this to work. But consider this. If my grade is a 95, and I go back and I run it again, what I get is, you've got an A, you did not get an A. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How can I both have an A and not have an A? And the answer is, basically, the structure of my conditional is wrong. All right. So keep in mind, right? Keep in mind that the computer cannot be wrong. All right. It cannot. But your logic can be wrong. All right. What I've made is a logical error here. All right. So someone in chat said beginners do not equal dummies. That's not necessarily true. But everyone's a beginner and everyone's going to make stupid mistakes. That is what it is. And all beginners are kind of dummies in some sense just because they're ignorant of certain practices and whatnot. I was a dummy. You know, everyone gets better. But I like to think of it more humorously than that. But yes. But yes. So what I want to... What I want to talk to or talk about now is something that's called the if-else conditional, right? Which is just the next iteration of an if. So basically, right now, this will run if this condition is true, and then the rest will run. But that's not super helpful if I want a branching dialogue, right? So what I mean by that is I want one set of instructions to run in one situation, and then I want another set of instructions to run in another situation, right? So I don't necessarily want one or the other to run. I want them kind of around, you know, one way or the other. So what I want to talk about, you know, is this concept of if-else. By the way, again, I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit here. One more thing I want to talk about real quick before we move on is the concept of brackets with if statements. All right. So you see here I have my if statement, and then I have my parentheses with my conditional, and then I have these brackets. Well, something you might see people do is you might see people do this. All right. What I've done here is I've removed the brackets. Now, this works assuming I only have a single line of code here. If I wanted to do two things, like then say grade equals 10, right? You can see MonoDevelop even unindents that, right? Because this will run all the time, not only if this conditional was true. If I wanted them both to be for that conditional only, I have to have the brackets, right? So if you see this without the brackets, this is completely legitimate. You can also do this. Some people write like this, right? So it's one line. If grade is greater than or equal to 90, print this, right? So just so you know, if it's only a single line of code, I don't need the brackets. Now, for today, I will have the brackets, so it makes it much more clear what's happening, right? But if you ever seen without the brackets, that's what's going on. You do not have to have the brackets with only a single line of code. So let's talk about the else statement, right? So what I want to do is I have my if statement here. Right after this bracket, I'm going to write the word else. And you'll see it turns that greenish, tealish, whatever. All right? And then I'm simply going to hit enter and two more brackets. Now, I don't have a condition for my else. My else will fire off, and that's what we call it, firing off, right? My else will, the code in my else statement will execute if my if statement was false, right? In this case, I can take this code and put it here, not underneath the conditional structure. So this is going to say this. if my grade is greater than 90, print you've got an A. Else, print you did not get an A. So if I run this, I'll go ahead and save this, and I run it, I will see you've got an A. Notice how I didn't see both lines, I only see you've got an A. Now, I'm going to change my grade to be an 85, and I'll run it again, and I will see, in a second here, you did not get an A. Okay, so we can see, and for someone in chat, these are brackets, these are square brackets, these are parentheses. Now, granted, I'm in America, that's what we call them in America. You guys in different countries might call them something completely different. But in America, anyway, these are parentheses, these are brackets, these are square brackets. Cool? Okay. Sorry. In case there's any confusion there, that these are in fact brackets. I don't know if maybe you can't see it on the screen or whatever. Maybe go full screen or whatever. But those are in fact brackets. Otherwise, some people call them curly braces. You can call them curly braces too. Anyway, that's just terminology for you there. So basically, so we have now our if-else. Okay, and again, the else is just like the if. If I only have one line of code, I could shorten this whole thing to look like this. This is completely legitimate, okay? No brackets. If I really wanted to mess with whoever was reading my code, I could type this. That works too, that's much harder to read. Or you can tab it out or whatever, right? We can do this stuff, but that's all formatting, really. It's mostly completely irrelevant. All right, so now I gotta go back and add my brackets. So 1 second here. All right. So this is our if-else structure, okay? So basically, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about the else. The else is what happens when it's not the if, right? That's kind of our default, okay? So if all else fails, the else block runs is basically a good way to think about it, all right? Sorry, reading through chat here real quick. If in doubt, use brackets. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. If you're not sure, use brackets. That's a great thing to mention. Am I going to show us common uses for scripts in Unity? No, because I don't even know what that means. There's just so much I could show you. But basically, I'm focusing on beginning stuff. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, everyone's just basically talking about brackets and stuff like that. Cool. Okay. All right, so we have our else statement here. So let's now talk, let's take this to the next level, okay? So let's talk about maybe a grading program that's going to read in a grade and tell me if I've got an A, a B, a C, a D, an F, or maybe it's an invalid grade, right? And so that's a very common first example for if statements, okay? Or maybe if you want to talk about video games instead of a grade, we might talk about, I don't know, your health in your current state or whatever. Though, I mean, you can have grade rankings in video games, right? In that case, though, S is somehow higher than A. I don't really understand, like, the Japanese ranking system or whatever. I play games and it says, you've got an S, and I have no idea what that means. So let's talk about this concept called an else-if statement, which takes us to the next level, right? An else-if is basically saying, if this is true, or if this is not false, else if this is true, else if this is true, and so on and so forth, right? So how this looks is this. So I'm going to say, if my grade is greater than or equal to 90, okay? Sorry, lost my place there. Couldn't find my cursor. If my grade is greater than or equal to 90, all right, we're going to print, you've got an A. Else if, okay? And then we have another conditional. Else if my grade is greater than or equal to 80, all right? And this is going to get a bit long here with all these brackets. I'm going to print, you've got a B. Else if grade is greater than or equal to 70, say you've got a C, and we're going to pretend there's only an A, B, or C, because I don't want to write all of them out. You guys get the idea. And then we're going to have our else here at the end that just says invalid grade. All right? So let's look at what's happening here, okay? The first things first is we're evaluating the value of grade to see if it's greater than or equal to 90, If it is, we're going to output you have an A. If it's not, we're going to immediately move on to the next case and say, hey, okay, this wasn't true. Is this one true? All right. Grade is greater than or equal to 80. In this case, it is, right? But let's pretend it's not. All right. We're going to say, okay, that one wasn't true. Is this one true? And then we're going to evaluate that. But let's say my grade is like 35. My parents are so proud. Let's say my grade is 35. So none of these evaluate to true. My else will then run. My else does not have an if to it. This last one runs if the previous ones did not. So, you know, if all else, your else will run, right? So if none of these catch it, this one will run, and I can just say invalid grade. Now, obviously, I would want to have the rest of my grades, the D and the F and stuff like that. All right. Also, consider this. Why didn't I say if my grade is less than or equal to 80 and my grade, or I'm sorry, if my grade is greater than or equal to 80 and my grade is less than 90, all right? I see this a lot too when students turn in homework for the classes I teach. I see this a ton where they say, hey, grade is greater than or equal to 80 and the grade is less than 90. And this is true, right? You know, this is completely legitimate. However, if my grade wasn't less than 90, this one would have run. So I don't need this second statement. It's just inefficiency. I don't need it, right? Same with the C and same so on and so forth, right? So basically, this one will handle everything that's 90 and above. I don't need to make sure we're below 90 here and below 80 here and stuff like that, all right? It's completely unnecessary, all right? People are talking about switch statements. I will get to switch statements. Just pacing, right? We will get to switch. We will cover switch statements, and I will also talk about when switch statements are ideal over if statements. Okay, so we will get there. Cool. So yeah, this is our classic if, else structure. We can have as many else ifs as we want. All right, but every if, else structure can only have one if and one else. Okay, I can't have multiple ifs, or else it makes it different structures. Now all these else's are part of this if and not a part of this one, right? I also can't have two else's. Just, it does not work, okay? Cannot have two else's. This is going to say, hey, there's no corresponding if. This also cannot work. Now, another thing that's interesting is, let's say I want to know if I got an A+. So I not only want to know if I have an A, but I also want to know if I have an A+. Now, I could just have a whole bunch more else ifs to say, hey, if my grade is a 95 or up, I've got an A+. If it's a 90 up, I've got an A, right? I can also do what's called nesting ifs, all right? Nesting ifs is a great way of having more complex levels or structure to our conditionals, okay? So I might say something along the lines of, if the grade is greater than or equal to 90, and then inside my bracket say, if my grade is greater than or equal to 96, right? I think I still have this pasted. Print, you've got an A+, else, print, you've got an A. Oops. So you can see I can nest. I have one if statement, and inside that if statement, I have another if statement. And guess what? If inside this if statement I wanted another if statement, I could do that. And I can do that as many, many, many times as I want. People often ask me what my favorite control structure is, and it's nested if statements. I love nested if statements. It all depends on your situation. They may not be the most useful or efficient thing in the world, but they are my favorite. So if I had to make a plush doll out of one control structure, it would be nested ifs. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic there. But we have this idea that all our control structures, all this stuff can be nested inside each other, and so that makes things much more complex, but also much easier to organize, which is good. All right, so one second, I'm going to read the chat here again. People talking about their games. So here's a good question. This is why tabbing is important. Yes. Yes, a million times yes. Shanio15, I think your name is. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. Senio, I don't know. But tabbing, by the way, is this spacing right here, like here and here and here. Tabbing is of the utmost importance when programming, all right? it makes your code a bajillion times easier to read. If you don't tab, like if you're a student turning in homework and it's not tabbed, I won't grade it, right? If you're at a job interview and you turn in code and it's not tabbed, you will not get the job. I guarantee you no one will hire you. Tabbing is of the utmost importance for readability. It allows me to see that, hey, all of this code is nested under this statement, and this code is nested under this statement, right? And all of this is nested under this function, right? And all of this function is nested under this class. So tabbing makes finding errors and everything so very, very simple. So yes, absolutely, tab your code, super important. I can't even stress to you how important it is. So great observation. I certainly appreciate you mentioning that in chat, because it's awesome. Cool. Yeah, so someone said, can you show us how it looks without tabs? So let's do that. So let me unindent, 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 unindent. Okay, so tell me how much easier this is to read, right? Where you have to kind of follow your brackets to know where your different parts are and stuff like that. I mean, this is awful. This is straight up awful, right? So much so that I can't even stand it anymore. I'm going back. There we go. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, there we go. And some people are asking, you know, this isn't a Unity tutorial. Well, it kind of is, because this is how we're going to work with code in Unity. So we're using MonoDevelop, we're running it in Unity and stuff like that. But yeah, we are focusing a lot on syntax because, you know, that's very important. So okay, at this time I talked about how we can nest if statements. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. All right. So a lot of people in chat have talked about this concept of switch statements. Okay, and a switch statement, which is sometimes called a case statement, depending on your language, is basically just a condensed version of an if statement. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this exact same structure, but I'm going to do it with a switch statement. And let me change this to something like 75, just so it's done. So let's look at what a switch statement looks like. A switch statement basically it works in a sort of a similar way to the if statement, where you're saying if this, then this. But a switch statement is saying, hey, evaluate this thing and give me several cases that it can be. All right? And the syntax looks like this. So it's switch and then something, all right? Then brackets and a semicolon. This is our standard switch statement, which might be called a case statement, like I said, in other languages and stuff like that. So basically, switch statement. And first thing we're going to do is we're not evaluating a conditional. It's not grade is greater than or equals 7, true or false. We're not doing any of that stuff. We are simply evaluating grade. That's it. All right? I don't know. Ooh, no, that's no good. Why did it do that? Ooh, hiss. Okay. I hit some wrong key, and MonoDevelop did not like it. So, whoops. Anyway. Okay, so we're not, like I said, we're not doing some conditional, some evaluation or anything like that. We're simply saying switch grade. And actually, you know what, my syntax foo might be failing me right now. I think I'm about to show you something that's not going to work. Whoops. So let's take a look. I don't, actually, you know what, I don't think I can do what I was about to show you. So, my mistake. We're going to change this up. So I was going to show you how we can do a switch with grade and build this same structure, but switches don't really work like that. So this is not something we'd want to do with a switch, because switches cannot do evaluations like this. Now, in some languages they can, but I don't believe in C# they can. Actually, you know what? I'm cheating. I'm actually opening up the internet. And I'm going to look, because it's been so long since I've used this. Switch statements are great for things like menu systems, which is what I use them for all the time, that I cannot remember. See here, this is kind of what happens. I can't remember if we can do, yeah, we cannot do evaluations in switch statements. My apologies, a total kind of a brain lapse there. But I just looked it up real quick, and I don't believe we can do that. So we can't do comparisons or things like that inside switch statements. All right. Real quick here, there's a lot of stuff on chat that I haven't seen. Difficulty. We will get to your inline if statements. Please be patient. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, so we're basically just talking about switch statements. Cool. I will get to inline if statements, by the way. So for the people that have asked and keep asking, please don't block up chat. We will get there. We will get there. So yes. So basically, what I was getting at is I was going to do a switch statement for this grade example. But then I've forgotten that only in certain languages can we do evaluations like grade is greater than or equal to 70 inside a switch statement. C# is not one of those languages. So I apologize for any confusion. That is completely my fault, my mistake. All right. So we're just going to flush that out of our brains because we cannot do that. We wouldn't want to do that with switch statements anyway because it just makes no sense. Switch statements are, so if statements are great when we want to evaluate ranges and things like that. Switch statements are great when we want to evaluate specific values. So when we want to evaluate a single variable, right, not multiples, if statements are the king of doing multiple variables, switch statements are great for evaluating a single variable against known values, right? Like I was just saying, the reason I use that the most is for menu systems, right? So pick an option or colors, right? So I'm actually just going to delete this here and we're going to start over with a new example. And so I'm going to say string color equals, I don't know, red. Cool. So I have this string color. And let's say I don't know what the color is, right? Now notice I'm not looking for a range or anything. I just want to see, is this red, is this blue, is this green, so on and so forth. This is a primary example of where a switch statement would be better than an if statement because there's no real evaluation. Instead, we're just taking a single variable and we're comparing it against known cases is what they're called. I actually did air quotes in my head, cases, and you guys couldn't see that, so my apologies. So basically, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say switch color, and this is the structure here. There's my brackets, ooh, and my semicolon. All right, and so what I'm doing is I'm evaluating the variable color, and I'm going to come up with a bunch of cases, right? So my case might be yellow, my case might be blue, my case might be red or green or whatever. And then I'll execute some code for whichever case runs, right? And so what I'm going to say is I'm going to use the keyword case, and I'm going to say case blue with a colon. All right, so next I'll write everything that happens if the color happens to be blue. So I might say something along the lines of print, this is a blue color. All right, and then I will finish with the keyword break. This break is very important. I'll show you what happens if we remove the break later. But this is one case, okay? So case blue, print, this is a blue color, okay? Case, let's see, yellow, and I will say, and let me just copy this. Print, this is a yellow color. And then my break statement. And then finally case, oops, red. It is case sensitive. So this is a red color with my break. And then I have my final, oops, there's a caps lock. I have my final case, which is called default, which I will say this is not a color. Default is like our else statement. Default is if the rest of these did not fire off, default will fire off. We do not have to have default. Default's completely optional, just like else was completely optional. They are not required, okay? So yeah, one question here. You don't need the semicolon at the end of the switch statement, last bracket. Yes, you do. I'll take it off here in a second and we'll take a look, but I believe you do. So let's go ahead and evaluate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. It's going to evaluate color. It's not going to fire on this statement here. All right. It's not going to fire here. It will catch this case and it will fire this. And since it fired this one, it will not fire default. So let's go ahead and run it. And I will see this is a red color. All right. So let's come back here. Let's go ahead, let's test your theory. Let's remove that semicolon. I believe we have to have the semicolon or else code after this will fail to function. I'm just going to throw this in here just to see what happens afterwards. But I believe this is an error. Let's see. You might be right. Maybe the semicolon isn't required. Interesting. Unity does not require it. In normal C# you have to have that semicolon. But whatever. Okay. Unity isn't required. Thanks, difficulty. So I was wrong there. Anyway, so let's, and actually, normally we won't have all these spaces either, and this is kind of weirding me out. So let's get rid of all this extra white space. just because it's easier to read when it's condensed without all this extra stuff. Okay, so here's our statement. Okay, so without all the white space. So again, we can see if this color were to be blue, all right, we'll evaluate this, and it says this is a blue color, and so on and so forth. Now let's look what happens if we don't have the break statement, all right? A break statement, basically a switch statement will evaluate a case and then run the code in that case until it encounters a break statement. So without the break statement, and I run it, you'll see what we get. Okay, so in Unity, we can't do this. In other language, or in C# normally we can. So C# normally we can remove the break statements and it would run the blue case and then run the yellow case and then hit this break statement. But apparently in Unity we don't need the semicolon, but we have to have the break. Normally you have to have the semicolon and you don't need the break. So that's weird. Okay, you can see how often I veer from the path in switch statements. I almost never use them. They're great for menu systems, and really that's kind of about it. Because like I said before, they can't do true evaluation. They can only look at a single variable and then come up with some cases for it. All right. I'm sorry for those of you who think I'm running through this. I'm just trying to cover this in the allotted time, so my mistake. Let's see here. Okay. Do we need brackets for multiple lines of code in a case? Well, cases don't use brackets, so no. I can have, I can just copy paste this. This is blue color multiple times, because what it's going to do is it's going to run everything from this colon to this break statement. Okay, so if I run this, we'll just see this is a blue color a bunch of times. All right, and that's that. So it's looking for that break statement. Okay, yeah. So we no brackets with switches except for these brackets right here. You can tell I don't use switch statements all that often. So mostly it's just if statements and stuff like that are a majority of what you're going to use. Okay. So let's go ahead and stop talking about switches now because I don't ever use them. But you guys get the syntax now. This is basically the syntax of a switch. And again, I will reiterate, the times that switches are incredibly useful is when you're evaluating a single variable against a slew of known cases, right? If that's not the case, if you have multiple variables or you need a range or anything like that, switches are not what you want. So, but anyway, now you know the syntax for them. And they are a type of conditional. All right. So let's come back here to just our blank code, and let's talk about our inline if statements now. Let's see here. Okay, so as Steak mentioned, case statements can fall through if they are empty, which I did not know in C#. So cool. Okay, so we can cascade one statement to the next by leaving them empty. So that's cool. Let's see here. Sorry about that. I'm just reading through chat. Okay, everyone seems to be kind of on page there. Just talking about switch statements and whatnot, and FSM and such. Okay, so let's talk about inline if statements real quick here. Inline if statements is, people have different terms for how they're called. I've called them the tertiary operators before, which is the question mark operator. We've also talked, or no, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I'm mixing my terms up. Anyway, inline if statements. I'm sorry, at this point I'm just kind of losing my mind. So let's talk about inline if statements, right? And basically what they are is a way of doing an evaluation in a single line without the if syntax. And it's a really, really shorthand way of doing things. So let's say I want to determine really easily if my grade is an A or not an A. I might do something like int grade equals 85. Okay, and let's say I want to have I want to store the letter equivalent, which I know we can do a char. I'm just going to do a string. We'll say letter grade, and so this is going to be our letter equivalent of this grade. And I can say something along. I could say something along the lines of, if grade is greater than or equal to 90, letter grade equals A, else, oops, letter grade equals B. Okay. So what I can do, this works really simply. Okay, just basically, ooh, and even look here, I did that, no semicolon there. So this works, and this assigns A and B, but it required 4 lines of code, 5 if you include the letter grade declaration, right? And so this is just a much more verbose way of doing it. I can combine this into 1 line of code with an inline if statement. And how that's going to look is this. So I'm just going to leave this here so we can kind of see the long way of doing this. I can instead say letter grade equals, and then in parentheses, I can say grade greater than or equal to, why does it keep doing that? Grade greater than or equal to 90, question mark, and then write A, colon, B. So let's talk about what just happened here. All right. This is the inline if statement way of doing this. All right. I'll go ahead and save that. So what we've basically said, we have our same declaration here, string letter grade, and when I say equals, this is my if statement right here. This is saying, hey, is grade greater than or equal to 90? Just like I did here. Is grade greater than or equal to 90? But instead of an if, I just have a question mark. So it's like saying, hey, is grade greater than or equal to 90? And you raise your voice, 90, right? Because I'm asking a question, question mark. If so, my value will be A. Else, my value will be B. See how that works? Okay. So this is an inline if statement. Now, some people are mentioning that you can use, yeah, I can use character as well, right? And do my single quote thing. I hate it when it does that. Single quotes, right? That's fine, but I'm just doing strings because I choose to. Whatever. In case I ever want to modify that to be more than one character or whatever. All right. So basically, yes. So this is our inline if statement, and we can write this a few different ways. Or no, we can do a few different examples. So I have my if grade is greater than 90, letter grade equals A, else. So you can see I've replaced all of that code with this single bit of code here, right? And so I don't need to necessarily use strings, right? I can do pretty much anything. But this is a great way of substituting values, okay? So let's say here, if I want to write if a number is even or odd. So I might have int num equals 5, all right? And so let's look at this. I might say something along the lines of print this number is, and then a space and end quotes, plus, and I'll talk about what I'm doing here. All right, so it is, and then I might say num modulus 2 equals 0, question mark. All right, and then I will say even, colon, odd. Oh, weird substitutions. All right, so I'll show you this work, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening here, okay? Because this, it's a weird bit of syntax, but let's see it. Once you understand the syntax, it's really not that bad. So let me go ahead and run this, and we see this number is odd. Cool. So it correctly evaluated. Let's see what it's doing, okay? So our number is 5, which is odd, right? And we're going to say print this number is, which is a string. The plus sign here is for concatenation. And concatenation basically means taking two things, putting them together. Not necessarily adding them together, just putting them together. So if I had one string hello and another string world, and I used the plus sign, they would concatenate to become hello world, right? So in this case, I'm concatenating this number is with the word even or with the word odd, which one of these, right? So this will end up saying this number is even or this number is odd. Okay, so that's what the plus sign in this part is. Now that we can adequately ignore that. Here is my inline if statement, all right, where I'm saying num modulus 2 equals 0. By the way, the modulus operator just returns the remainder of division, right? So any even number divided by 2 will equal 0. Any odd number divided by 2 will equal 1, right? Because that's just how it works. The remainder of an odd number by 2 is always 1. So we're saying, hey, does this number modulus 2 equal 0? If it does, right, because here's our question mark, if it does, our value is going to be the string even. Else, our value is going to be the string odd. All right? So again, that is our inline if statement. Okay, yeah, commonly known as syntactical sugar, as someone put it in the chat. So, and also, yes, you can nest inline ifs. Another person asked if you can nest inline ifs. Now, as far as efficiency, this isn't necessarily faster or slower than regular if statements. It's just another way of writing it, right? Programming is all about multiple ways of doing the exact same thing, and you can just, salt to your taste. So a lot of people like inline if statements because they're faster, right? And they're not cluttered, and they're easier in that way. All right. So yeah, so basically that is our inline if statement. So at this point, we have talked about if statements, if-else statements, if-else if statements, talked about nesting if statements and complex if statements. We have talked about switch statements, albeit rather erroneously, and I do apologize for that. And we've talked about inline if statements. All right. So I will stick around. We're going to do a little bit more question and answer, but that is the material that I wanted to cover today. So I will read through chat here. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them right now. I didn't get to as many questions as I would have liked to, because I kind of got into doing the presentation there. So please, if you have questions, ask them. Otherwise, like I said, we're going to wrap up here, but I do want to answer anything that anything I can. So let's see here. I'm just reading through chat right now. So Mart Forg has basically the syntax correct. So we have our evaluation logic, right? This is our conditional, our question mark. The question mark and the colon are always there. We have our conditional, we have our true value, and we have our false value. Now notice I'm not doing something like name equals right? I'm not doing an assignment here, right? That's not how these work. They return back some value, but I can't do that stuff internally. All right. Let's see here. Delegates, please. We are not ready. You guys are not ready for delegates, so we're not doing delegates yet. Though, if you are curious about delegates, just go to the scripting section on unity3d.com/learn. Go to the learn modules, the learn tutorials. Go to the scripting section. I believe it's under intermediate scripting, and delegates. We have all you could want to know about delegates is right there. It's a great video. I'm a little biased since I made it, but yeah, check it out. So delegates are there. Let's see here. Can we ask questions kind of irrelevant to basic scripting? Maybe. Depends on how irrelevant. I really like to stick to scripting, though. When is there going to be Facebook tutorials on the website? There won't be. We don't promote or anything with Facebook that I'm aware of. We might. I don't know. But, I try not to do too much third-party stuff because they can change it, and that makes all my stuff wrong, and I don't like that. So, probably none. Or probably will not be. Does Unity have a relation class or something with Coder Dojo? Not that I'm aware of. Let's see here. Question about the Polygon Collider. Yeah, just hit me up on. If you have questions that aren't script related, just hit me up on Twitter, and I will certainly help you out, or at least point you to the people that can help you out. So any questions or anything, please hit up Twitter. Actually, I'm going to pull this up while I finish reading chat here. Questions, comments, concerns. Follow us. Talk to us on Twitter at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ranch. So while you guys are reading that plug there, I'm going to continue reading through chat. Can we have more statements? So inline if statements, there's that. Inline if statements are either an either or, so we can't do three, right? I can't do even, odd, or other, right? That's only two values. So good question, but no, we cannot. Let's see. A plugin system. I'm not talking about a plugin system today. Again, way too complex. Let's see here. I'm also not covering modding right now. That would be silly. I will do more scripting. I have two more planned. I want to talk about loops and I want to talk about classes. Things just get busy, so I do need to get those scheduled. Let's see. How do we go about creating splash screens? Just hit me up on Twitter, because that's pretty much beyond the scope of this. What is the normal way to instantiate an object in Unity? Just use the instantiate function. Ternary operators. Thank you, Steak Pinball. I said tertiary earlier, and that means 3, and that's not correct. Ternary. Thank you for for mentioning that. The inline if statement is also this question mark is called the ternary operator for inline if statements, and I called it tertiary earlier, and that was completely not correct. Okay. All right. It seems like a lot of the questions here are not really related to what we're talking about today. Clay Sean says if GameObject.tag equals play. So okay. So a question that was just posted in chat right now was this. They're saying that this does not work. Okay. This is Clay Sean's question. So Clay Sean, listen up. What is wrong with this statement? Now remember when I talked about the things that most beginners are going to mistake when doing if statements is they are going to forget the double equal sign is different than the single equal sign. So Clayshawn, that is your problem. You did a single equals, which is an assignment. You need a double equals, which is an equality operator. So that's right there what the problem was. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of people in chat saw that too. Cool, perfect. Let's see here, dependency injection, not today. Keep the question, why do people want to learn C# instead of using FSM? I don't know, because we do. Honestly, if an entire industry is doing that, there might be something to it. So I don't know why you would want to use an FSM over C#. Let's see here. So you could do random range. Yeah, so to do inline if statement with a random, right? So let's see here that I could do something like forgetting even odd logic. Let's just say if I just want to randomly output, I could do something like random dot range. I mean, it always has to come back to an if statement. So random dot range 1 to 10 modulus 2 equals 0, right? I could do something like that. I mean, we can get pretty complex with it, but everything always has to be a true or false. So this is still an if statement, even if it's a different syntax. So I could do random.range in there or anything like that. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. So a question about a short way of doing a for loop, like the inline if statement. No, I mean for loops are already pretty simplistic. They're already very condensed, so there's no like inline if statement version of a for loop that I'm aware of. Who knows? Maybe someone will come out with and prove me wrong. Let's see here. Okay, so you can nest ternary statements. Yes, you can. Okay. All right, and everything else seems to kind of be about multiplayer and stuff like that. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you all very much for following along. I hope it was helpful. Sorry that I got scatterbrained in a few places. That'll happen sometimes. So, if I didn't answer your question or I did something wrong and you just want to make fun of me, just hit me up on Twitter. And I do apologize for sort of being off a little bit. Next week is the putting it together, the cinematic scene composition. We're going to build a dude walking away from a car explosion in slow-mo, just because I think that's awesome. It's going to be not a lot of like entirely new stuff, but it's going to just be another way of looking at how to compose scene elements for like in-game cinematics and things like that. So it's interesting to check out. I certainly enjoy it, so it's worth checking out there. Otherwise, thank you all very much for following along. I will be in chat for a few minutes more, so if you have more questions, we can continue talking there. But I am going to go ahead and end the video stream. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a fantastic week.